Hello, hello. Welcome all. This is Philip from DataCamp calling in, and I'm very excited to be your host for the session about surprise AI, hence the name Radar AI. And it's obviously a super interesting topic, right? Large language models are changing the nature of programming. AI can now write, explain, fix code, and is getting better at it every week. That means that for anyone who's writing code as part of their job, whether they're software developers or data scientists, their role will inevitably change. And today we're going to touch on the current state of AI-assisted coding, how to roll it out in the enterprise, as well as explore what new workflows and developments are in sight. I'm excited to do this with two experts that are hauling from the world's most influential and innovative tech companies. Our first guest here is Jordan Tigani, CEO and co-founder at the analytics platform Motherduck, previously chief product officer at SingleStore, helping build a cloud-native SaaS business, and the founding engineer for Google BigQuery, which needs no introduction. Jordan is also the author of the O'Reilly book, Google BigQuery, The Definitive Guide. And his biggest claim to fame is predicting the World Cup matches using machine learning with a better track record than Paul the Octopus. That's pretty impressive indeed. Welcome, Jordan. I have to say, Motherduck is a great name and also a pretty amazing platform. We actually built a Motherduck integration into DataLab, the DataCamp's data notebook that I'm building or helping build here at DataCamp. Welcome.
Thank you.
Then joining Jordan is Michele Catasta, VP of AI at Replit. It's an AI-powered software development and deployment platform with millions of users. He has been doing research on transformer models since 2018, so well before it was super hip. And he worked in teams that created Palm and Palm 2 while at Google. At Replit, his team recently launched Code Repair. It's a 7 billion parameter LLM for fixing broken code. Michele also works as an AI advisor at CodeU. In the past, he held positions as head of applied research at Google and research scientist in AI at Stanford University. Hey, Michele, thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely, thank you.
All right, great. We only have 40 minutes, and we also want to leave some questions for Q&A at the end. So I suggest we get to it and hear what you have to say about some of the topics we'll be touching on today. I want to start by setting some background context on LLM-powered workflows, and maybe a quick one to start for you, Jordan. Which teams or roles have you seen make use of AI-assisted coding, and how have you seen them use it?
So I think I was really surprised actually how quickly people started picking up LLMs when like ChatGPT, GPT-4 came out. It already started changing how analysts are doing their jobs. We were talking to people and they said, they're spending a lot of their time like cut and pasting between like query UI and like ChatGPT, and I think it really has started to kind of impact workloads. Obviously, developers, all over the place are using using this for helping them write code better. Data scientists as well. So I think I think the other thing is though there's a lot of excitement, a lot of people starting to use some of these technologies. I think people then pretty quickly run into roadblocks in terms of like how good things actually are. It's like it's really good to get like a demo and to see like, hey, this is sort of exciting, but then in terms of like actually sort of end to end being able to replace like how you do how you write your queries, I think that's still a ways off.
Yeah.
But in terms of like
that's something we'll also touch on, by the way.
Yeah. In terms of being able to stay in the flow, I think it's really helpful so far of like, you can sort of write what you think it might be, and then the AI can sort of like fix it for you, which certainly helps spend time going back and forth.
Yeah, it's pretty transformational. You already touched upon it. You have analysts using AI-assisted coding workflows in like their IDEs of choice, or just ChatGPT. You also have like traditional programmers, like building software programs. Michele, like in your experience, how would you say that these LLM-powered coding, this coding experience is different in a way for traditional software programming versus more like data focused or analytical work?
I would say what's different about them at this point is not necessarily like exclusively making developers more productive, is also how much we're expanding the developer base. So apart from every single profile that Jordan mentioned, but those are the classic people that we're used to, having influence on software development. We're seeing what we call at Replit a new class of citizen developers, people that have a need to create software, but they have not been trained formally to be software developers. And especially in the last 1 year plus, since ChatGPT and the integration of large language models in IDEs such as Replit, we're seeing a lot more people attempting to create software. And the way in which I measure models improving is not much at this point, how often people accept what they complete or what they generate. It is rather their success rate to create what they have in mind. So let's teleport ourselves to 18 months ago. ChatGPT came out. People try to copy paste code in Replit, and oftentimes they were not able to build even a simple, say, web application. As of today, that is the case. So I have people that are building startups that have never been software developers, and they can go very far just by stitching together outputs of LLMs and asking to debug, asking to basically fix their code. That's probably what I'm most excited about. The good people are even better today because of LLMs, but the people who never wrote software, now they're becoming software developers, and that's what gets us hype at Replit.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's how AI is kind of taking the scare off of code, where people were before hey, this code thing is not for me, and then all of a sudden AI is actually with this tool next to me, it's becoming something achievable for people that are not necessarily formally trained in AI.
Exactly
sure.
Right. Yeah.
Cool. Can you somehow quantify the productivity boost that one gets from AI assistance? Is that something that you guys at your companies have tried to quantify, have tried to measure? Is that something we should do in the first place? Jordan, maybe?
You.
Sure. We haven't tried to quantify it, and I think there are some people that really like to use AI, and some people that don't. We sort of released this we call it Fix It in our UI, where you can write the SQL as you think it's going to be, and then it will, if it's wrong, it'll fix it. And I think one of the really cool things about that is it does change how you approach coding and how you approach, because usually it's oh, I don't remember the syntax for differencing two timestamps, and so you go out to the documentation. It's okay, and it's you use interval and intervals and quotes and all this stuff. But with AI, you can actually just sort of write what you think it's going to be, and then if it's wrong, it'll fix it for you. And so it just gives you sort of a lot more confidence. And I think we have we do track sort of the success rate of how good we are at fixing up what people are saying. And I think I think we're sort of an 80% right, 80% rate on on actually fixing your code. But I think in terms of how much more productive does that make an engineer or an analyst, I think that's a lot harder to measure, especially if you look at sort of real engineering tasks, not just sort of sort of lead code style, solving small problems.
Yeah, and then anecdotally, Michele, maybe anecdotally, just from user feedback, I remember people saying yeah, this is making me X times faster. Have you and anything you can share there? Are people really saying that this is a game changer for them?
They do, many of them. And conversely, I think it's important to mention many absolutely don't see any advantage, or they even try to stay away as much as possible from AI. And I respect that. I think those of us who have been trained to write code, many years ago, we all have our own idiosyncrasies, and we like to develop software in our own way. I think what is more important to focus on is the new generation, people that are learning now, and they're AI first, first-class citizens. They were raised with LLMs by their side. They're going to be writing software in a completely different way. And I see them at hackathons. I see them how quickly they can build stuff in 24 hours. And to me, that's mind-blowing. So I wouldn't be able to assign a multiplier to that.
Sure.
but it's definitely something that 5 years ago I would have not even imagined. That being said, we also have some companies that are using Replit, and they are measuring very carefully, their productivity improvements. And in the software development life cycles, there are a lot of different steps. The step where you actually write the code, they're seeing speed ups over 20% easily. But I would say now that AI is gonna become to be imbued across every single product feature, it was gonna be very hard to measure exactly how much time it's saving. It's helping you to search for code. It's helping you to do Q&A over a code base. It's helping you to debug your builds. It's super invasive. That at a certain point, I think we're gonna stop thinking about how much time it saves us, and we're gonna consider it table stakes. That's the thing in the future we're going to.
Yeah. Very interesting. I think this is a great segue into the next section of this talk, if you will, which is more about like the quality and potentially also privacy concerns around deploying LLM models for basically like elevating your coding workflows. Jordan, you already touched upon it at the beginning. Like sometimes like it's not working out as expected, or not for all tasks. It's already performing well. You already mentioned also like the fix-it feature in the Motherduck UI is right, like roughly 80% of the cases, give or take. In terms of coding assistance, is there specific use cases where you can say like actually here AI is extremely strong, but actually in these fields it's actually less. Like it's still like a challenge to have it perform well, Michele?
I think, especially depending on the programming language you're targeting, like from personal experience, we see exceptional performance with relatively basic Python and JavaScript code, which do represent the majority of the open source code that you can find on GitHub. So it's not a surprise that these models are so powerful. Now, conversely, when it comes to, say, low-level system development, that's where LLMs probably don't shine as much as they do on web applications. That being said, I think ultimately what determines the quality of the AI plus human in the loop is how lazy the human becomes because of what AI generates. So if you become complacent because you just take for granted that the output of an LLM is going to give exactly what you want, eventually you're going to become a sloppy developer. But the combination of a human who's doing basically code reviews and like AI generating the bulk of the code, I think we're going to see the quality improving regardless. So think about it. Before you needed two humans, one to write code and the other one to review it at the very least. And now you have the coupling of an AI plus a human behaving as code writer and code reviewers. And I think if there is a will to have high quality code, there is always going to be high quality code.
Yeah. I see. Anything you want to add to that, Jordan?
I think on the data side, the stakes are very high in using LLMs and allowing basically kind of a machine to sort of to generate your the thing you're using to make business decisions. I think it's like, hey, which one of my sales reps are doing well, and which ones are going to have to worry about their jobs. Like, you want to make sure that you're actually measuring that correctly. Or how's my revenue doing? Should I open up a new plant or store in the Southeast region? And if the LLM doesn't exactly know what that is, then or get something wrong, then you can make really spectacularly bad decisions in subtle ways. And in data, a lot of the times the things that you're dealing with are very hard to define. Like even like, what's my head count? Like that's a hard, like it's a surprisingly hard question to ask. Like, do you count interns? Like, okay, if you're counting like how many people we need in the office, how many seats we need in the office, or how many machines, then absolutely you count interns. But if you're counting, from a budgetary perspective, like that's going to be a very different thing. And revenue similarly is like we have all sorts of discounts and ramps and all sorts of like all
Sure.
sorts of things that make those kinds of things hard. And there's a lot of just sort of institutional knowledge about these kinds of things. And I think so I think where it can work well is like if you have a relatively constrained environment, And I think, pre-LLMs, like ThoughtSpot was a company that basically was able to sort of enable you to sort of question and answer your data. But I think the way that they were able to do that is you had to very carefully manicure and curate your data set and your metadata. I think LLMs are giving you the ability to sort of be a little bit more loosey-goosey with some of that stuff, but I think there's just so much business logic and knowledge that is in people's heads that an LLM is really never going to be able to do those things. So I think you have to be pretty careful about sort of what you turn loose on an LLM. But I think, as Michele mentioned, like the code reviewer type things where you basically have a human and an AI kind of operating together to make each other better. I think there's amazing potentials.
Yeah, definitely. Like how I look at it and get from what you're saying is like as you go more high level, as you're like open-ended business question, there's like a ton of assumptions in there. There's a ton of hidden context there. And if you're not being very specific to the LLM, like you'll have to give that context. And I'm actually believing that in the next couple of years, there will be more advanced techniques for like internalizing all of that organizational context and all of like the semantics, like what does this column mean? What does this table mean? And like, what's our definition of revenue, etc. But right now it's indeed like still a bit scary to just ask the question like, hey, where should we open up an office? Because then a lot of assumptions are like confused in the system for sure. Continuing on the quality question, actually, earlier this year, there was a white paper that got released, and it said that the code longevity, so basically like how long a line of code survives in the code base before it's rewritten, that goes down. So actually that the quality of code in code bases is decreasing since like LLMs were unleashed on the world. What are your thoughts on this, Michele? You mentioned before, like the AI is writing, I'm reviewing. Are we getting lazy, complacent, just committing without thinking?
I believe that. I think everyone is for a good reason. Writing most software is not a pleasant endeavor. I think not most of the software you write is not intellectually stimulating. So when AI helps you to write most of the boilerplate and the glue code, of course you start to become complacent. And that's why we were talking about code reviewing, Jordan and I, because it's so important to make sure that the human is actually in the loop and not lazily copy pasting the code. That being said, I read the paper when it came out. One of the confounding factors that we need to keep in mind is the fact that we are capable of writing much more code than before. So the time it takes to replace a line of code today, of course, is much shorter than it was in the past. And
of course,
I know that they do some ablation studies in that paper to make sure that they try to isolate the change. But still, I think the more we're going to have AI in the loop capable of writing very large diff across many files, the more lines are going to be changing much faster. So I don't see a decay of quality as much as probably the paper makes you believe. But
yeah, I didn't think about it that way. It's true. Any like tips or tricks that you can share with us to not become complacent, to not become like, yeah, look, this looks good. Is there a way to catch you? Like I have to say, like I'm constantly using AI assisted coding, and it's easy to like get carried away.
I think as simple as making sure that code reviews are actually happening and are not sloppy. So at that point, you have to imagine that there is an AI working in tandem with a human, and then there is another person in the team who's actually reviewing the code. And especially for teams that are very much heavily relying on AI, what they say is, guys, we know that 80% of that PR came from an LLM. So at this point, most of the burden is on the reviewer rather than on the person who pushed the PR. And as long as the entire team gets into that mindset and we give even more importance to reviews, then I think we're good. Of course, this is a mindset shift that is not going to happen overnight. I think code reviews have been around for at least a couple of decades officially across large companies. We're not going to change the modus operandi of people in 18 months, but I think we're getting there, especially thanks to these studies that are coming out in the past few months.
Great.
If I can just add one thing on that, like I think sometimes when you're making a code change and you're adding a feature and there's a function that that exists in the code base that is almost right, but not quite what you want. I think an LLM is, can basically copy that function with the changes that you need. And like, it's very easy to say, yes, I'm just going to like take this thing with a bunch of like cut and pasted but slightly changed code. The proper way to do it is actually just to sort of like change that original function so that it can do the thing that you actually want it to do. And that way, in the future, when there's bug fixes, et cetera, you just have to change it in one place rather than like having this sort of like slightly modified version all over the code base. And I think at the limit, you get lots of sort of like, ghost copies of the same things, and you can be sort of less careful. And I think, as Michele mentioned, like having a human who can point out like, no, actually you should go back and fix, changes at the source, and like there's a better function to use is good. Maybe in the future LLMs will get good at being able to sort of make those types of changes instead. But I think that requires a lot. I think another higher level of thinking than they can currently do.
Yeah. Sure. From your experience at Replit deploying AI, from your experience at Motherduck making AI available, what have you seen the reaction of like larger organizations that are leveraging your tools be to? What have you seen their reaction to like adopting these tools? Are they completely fine with it? Say like, hey, open up the switches, like enable it, and let's roll. What are certain considerations that you're seeing these enterprises take? What are considerations that other enterprises should take before they can in a compliant way, in a safe way, adopt AI-assisted coding workflows? How do you roll it out, basically? What do you need to put in place? Who gets access first? Like, what does that look like? Michele, maybe?
Should I start? Yes. So one of the main concerns, I believe, for enterprise is licensing and copyright. So as we know, LLMs tend to memorize code. It's very important that they are not trained on any code that is not permissibly licensed, or if that is the case, at least you need a system in place that tells you if a certain excerpt of code that the model is generating is copied verbatim from, say, a GPL repository or anything for which you need to show the attribution of the code. So it's probably one of the top of mind concerns that enterprises have. The other ones are, I would say, more similar to what we have been discussing in the past 15 minutes, as in what happens to our developers, what happens to the quality of the code that they generate, are they going to become complacent? Shall we disable AI when we're interviewing them, et cetera, et cetera. So, and last but not least, and honestly don't have a silver bullet for this problem, we get questions about security, as in LLMs can generate code that might introduce security bugs. How do we make sure, how do we avoid that? And as of today, there is not in my opinion, there is not a strong solution to that, apart from code reviews that, once again, they need to play a role in the picture.
Yeah. And do you see also a concern in the direction of I'm sharing potentially my entire code base with an LLM, and I'm concerned about like it's spitting out like my code to someone else using this LLM? And
there is likely that is probably the only one for which I think the industry has a good enough solution at this point. So there are companies that allow you to deploy models on-prem, or also the open source world is flourishing, especially in the last year. So if you are willing and courageous enough to find one of the open source models and deploy it yourself and build the application integration to make that happen, by all means, you're free to do so. And that means that none of your data is sent by the wire to any third party. So like compared to the security issue that I was covering before, for which we need a proper technical solution that I don't think is within grasp in the short term, making sure that your data doesn't leak is likely feasible. It comes with shortcomings, of course, as in you're not going to be able to use frontier models from, say, OpenAI or Anthropic, but at least you can decide to willingly do so.
Is that something that you did, Jordan, at Motherduck, like deploy LLMs in on-prem or like specific for enterprises?
We're not deploying anything on-prem or specific for enterprise, but there's an interesting thing about data as opposed to, I think, or SQL as opposed to sort of to more generic code that actually organization-specific solutions can be better than sort of broad solutions. Whereas like if you're building an LLM, you kind of want it to look as much code as you want, and then it kind of understands how code works, and it can be really good at like coming up with, hey, I want to have a function that does X, Y, and Z, or connects these two systems. The broader it can look, the better. But actually, a lot of times in an organization, people write the same SQL over and over again. And that includes the business logic. That includes knowing, okay, which table you need to do X, Y, and Z. And so actually, by just actually narrowing the search to a particular organization's queries that they've run before, you can do a better job than you could do actually if you were looking across companies. And I think this is where I think we can have an advantage by building SQL specific solutions and rolling those out, and then you get better privacy, and people can be much more comfortable with how their data is being used and how their queries are being used.
And you're doing that at Motherduck, no? Building a SQL specific LLM?
We are actually we worked with a company called MemberStation to build a SQL specific LLM, a DuckDB specific LLM. We are not currently doing anything organization specific stuff, but we're starting to work in that direction. Basically using RAG and using kind of some.
What does it matter? What does it matter what the definition of revenue is on the open source? Like out there in the open, like we have our definition of revenue, and that's the one you should follow. Like it's kind of that in short.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, cool. All right, so that was like the part on quality and also like rolling it out. I actually haven't thought about like the security aspect of like what AI can introduce in terms of security bugs and who to blame at some point if things go wrong. I was hoping that in the last couple of minutes we could basically like put up our crystal ball and make some predictions for the future and see what like the future has in store for us. Of course, impossible to say, but I'd love to get your thoughts from your perspectives. I'm always like, you already mentioned it, Michele, the AI is like my pair programming buddy. I have to review what it's doing. I would say today we can consider them like a recent graduate, pretty good, like taking instructions pretty literally. At what point can we trust an AI like we do a super esteemed, highly trusted colleague that we have like blind faith in that they will write like decent codes? Like how far away are we from having somebody like that by our side rather than somebody that we like carefully have to review everything they're doing?
I'm gonna go with a contrarian take. I don't think we should be blindly trusting anyone who puts their hands in a code base. And that's how very large companies manage to scale very complete architectures and make them reliable. I mean, Jordan has a good experience in BigQuery. I don't think that piece of software happened because there were just a bunch of amazing software developers. It's the process that brings you all the way there to make it reliable is what makes the difference. So long story short, first of all, even when we accomplish the mythical AGI, if you think about it, we talk of AGI at least in one of the definitions when AI is going to be comparable in terms of intelligence with a human. No human out there can be trusted to put their hands in a code base and make big changes, right? We always want them to go through a code review process. So even no matter how long it's going to take us to accomplish AGI, my recommendation would be we'll still need someone in the loop to make sure that what the AGI creates is actually correct and code reviewed. So we're probably talking about an even longer timeline when we're going to be accomplishing, I think, what people call ASI, so like a super intelligence. And when that is the case, probably there's going to be the least of our concerns. I think like society will be so different that yeah.
I see.
So yeah,
I see.
that's my contrarian take. I think it's interesting to build on agents and autopilots, like systems that can help you to go end to end. But ultimately, to make sure that they align with what the human wants, we still need the double check coming from the person who wants to create that software.
Yeah. Could that double check come from another AI at some point?
Let's see.
All right. So suppose that Jordan at Motherduck, you continue developing like SQL specific LLMs, adding more AI capabilities into how like people write code, write SQL queries, how they answer questions. How would you say that the life of like a typical data team member will change if they like go all in on this AI assisted world? Like,
I think first of all,
does their daily life look different? Like Michele already mentioned, probably it's going to be more reviewing and less coding. Are there other like different like aspects that will be markedly different according to you?
well, I think one thing that it's along the lines of what Michele was talking about before, about being able to bring more people to coding. I think we can bring more people to data and being able to sort of make solve problems with data. I think for a long time, there's sort of been this sort of holy grail of self-service analytics. So a business user can somebody who's comfortable in Excel can basically say, hey, I want to ask some questions of my data or understand data without having to having to know SQL, having to deeply know how the data model works and how everything works. I think we will start to see the abilities of more people to be able to get things done. But I also think that in order to do that, we're going to need essentially another level of abstraction, which is, we have the physical, basically sort of the physical data that's in our databases. And our data models and our data schemas. And I think we're going to have to sort of have really good definitions of those and have, a higher level data modeling language that I think our data people are going to define. That's going to include the business logic of what does revenue mean, so everybody can use the same, be talking about the same things. And then the LLMs will be able to sort of understand that, and that's also going to be able to allow us to start to make real business decisions based on that. So I do think that kind of the systems are going to have to look different, because the systems are going to sort of know how to talk to this data model, and then we're going to have to make sure that we kind of curate that model. So I do think that those things are going to be different. On the other hand, I do think that giving data people superpowers and making them be able to sort of write a lot more, and better, better SQL, better analytics is also going to be transformational in how they do their jobs.
Yeah, definitely. I think like the ability of AI making things more accessible, also as Michele already mentioned in the beginning, that's super exciting. What that does bring is the need for a larger population of folks to be data literate, so to say, to be able to like discern a trend from a plot, or to be able to say like, this is a correlation that's actually a correlation. I'm not making this up. Like DataCamp has great courses on that, obviously, but I do think that that's becoming more of a like a general ability that people need to, like a general skill that people will need to master. Maybe one to for Michele, as you're building basically Replit, an IDE used by millions of folks. The IDEs that we know today, like the very common one, like Replit, like Visual Studio Code, they already existed before like this entire AI hype blew up. Right now, I'm seeing these AI functionalities being extensions into these IDEs, but it's not that the core IDE experience is extreme, like super different from what it was before. As AI becomes more advanced, are you expecting that like the core user experience and how we interact with programs, how we interact with files, how we write programs, that also going to completely change because of AI?
I do think so. When we make choices about what to surface in our product, or even when we want to decide among 2 or 3 different ways of doing one thing, which one should we surface, which one should we highlight, at this point is usually always an AI-driven feature. So even if this change doesn't happen overnight, I think that there is slowly a paradigm shift happening. There are some companies that are taking a more radical approach, because they're starting from the ground up. So maybe the first one that comes to my mind is Cursor, where they're really trying to build a AI first IDE. As you mentioned, like Replit has been around for many years. People are used to a certain like familiar feeling with the IDE, so we can't really disrupt it from the ground up overnight. That being said, we are building as we speak features where you enter the product directly with AI. So, you start to chat, you ask the bot basically what you want to do, and then we guide it through the process. And more that's going to turn into an agentic workflow where we try to build the application for you, and then only the last mile is taken care basically by the human, where they can do the last touch-ups. So regardless, I think if you're starting from scratch or if you're a product that already exists, I see them all progressing and becoming more AI-centric. That being said, I have to bring in my hot take as always. I don't want a lot of the goodies of ideas that we built in the last decades to disappear immediately. Like there is a lot to earn from static analysis and all the different amazing tool chain that we built during the past few decades. So I hope that there's always going to be access to those very low-level tools that some of the developers use. And there is a reason why we put so much effort to build that technology.
Of course,
so I don't want it to disappear.
We don't have to throw the kid with the bathwater. It's a Dutch saying. I'm not sure if it's an English one. Right.
Yeah,
cool.
no.
We almost have to get ready for Q&A, but I do want to understand from you. You already mentioned it. Like, we'll have to learn to review the code more carefully. We'll have to be able to vet what the AI is doing. But suppose I'm new to data. Let's make it specific about like landing a career in data and starting to basically work in data teams, or at least trying to get insights from data. I want to get into that field. I know that AI is there. How should I get started? Like, how can I build skill that is relevant? How can I, like, should I still learn the basics of Python, or is that something I can just always leave over to AI? Should I immediately go for more advanced, like high-level topics? Should I no longer care about learning to read Python and SQL? Like, what suggestions do you have for people wanting to break into the field in a world where AI is becoming table stakes? Jordan?
I would just say find a problem that you're interested in solving, and dig into it and use the tools that are available to help. Either AI related tools or Python or SQL, and it's always helpful to, like, you start with a curiosity about something, and then and take a sort of a problem solving approach versus, like, watching a bunch of YouTube videos or kind of reading books and blogs. So is there something that is going to help you in your day-to-day job, or like you've always wanted to understand, football scores, and you start poking at it, and then you'll use that as sort of a framework. So I realize that's sort of not an AI specific answer, but I think that's generally the best way of learning.
And it's still valid, regardless of like AI. I see. Michele, you have thoughts on this?
I think it's important to learn some of the skills from the ground up. So I totally agree with Jordan. There is you need to learn how to fill the data. I know it's a very weird expression that I heard from many data scientists. If you just blindly trust the LLM creating Python and pandas code for you, and you don't know how to vet the results that code generates, you're not becoming like a data person. So there is, I think, a certain level of training that you want to do, regardless of the AI, in order to become proficient and to train that muscle of how to criticize the results that are being generated. That I think is hard to get rid of that. With or without AI.
I sometimes try to bring up the analogies, like, just because we have calculators doesn't mean like we're no longer teaching people to do like 7 times 8 in primary school, right? It's like getting a feel for like the large, like how large a number is. Like, once you know it, of course, like, use the calculator, but just like that intuition around numbers and mathematics, that's something we definitely still need to train. All right, great. Super insightful session. I learned a ton of stuff. It's very exciting to see how Replit is adopting AI and like being at the frontier of like new kind of user experience powered by AI. And also on the SQL side, I'm super excited to see what SQL specific LLMs and also like infusing context of the organization is going to bring to the data professionals. I was hoping in the last 5 minutes we could still do a quick bit of Q&A, and I actually found a question here. I'm going to show it on stage because it's something that we actually talked about before starting the session, just among the three of us. Have AI coding assistants changed hiring practices? And if so, how? Are technical interviews still prevalent in the era of AI coding assistants? What do you want to see from candidates these days? Jordan.
Yeah, if I could jump in and I'd just say that we used to use Replit for our coding interviews, and I was saying before we had to stop using that because the AI assistant got so good that it would just sort of autocomplete the questions that we answered. And then I guess there's just sort of the broader question is like, okay, well, if you can autocomplete like something like, are you really testing skills that are important anymore? Are we like, for example, you use the calculator example, are we just testing that someone knows how to multiply, or someone actually knows how to put things together and actually solve real world problems? So I do think that we're probably going to have to change how we do interviews. I think they'll probably get better, and they'll probably be, get better at measuring real world skills versus just sort of like, can you solve this leak code problem? But I think that also is hard to do, which is why people rely on the leak code problems in the first place.
Yeah. I see. Michele, you want to shine your light on that?
Yeah. So first of all, Jordan, we're gonna allow you to disable AI for interviews. That feature is coming. So I'm glad to hear that we're using Replit for interviews. That being said, given that I try to hire people who are passionate about building these systems, I can't really ask them never to use AI during the interview process. So my recipe has been the following. I try to have a certain amount of interviews that are old school, so like whiteboard or pen and paper style, where they can't use any level of assistance. And then maybe one or two of them allow you to use any tool with the following caveats. I asked to screen share so that the interviewer can see actually how they use any AI tooling out there. So I want to see how productive they are, what is their mindset, how capable they are in using those tools. And at the same time, also the bar raises substantially. Because if you have a powerful LLM in the loop, what I expect to build in 45 minutes is much more than what you would build in isolation without any assistance. So it's probably like a double-edged sword, but I 100% agree with Jordan that we should more and more focusing on interviewing for real-world skills. And if ultimately this is what developers are becoming, it is at the intersection of their own knowledge and AI, this is what we should learn how to test. I don't think any of us has the perfect solution, but that's why we are daring to have this kind of hybrid interview process right now.
Yeah. I see. Thanks. So like this. Great. I think we have time for one more question. I'll do the briefer version of this. Rather than the top 3 of AI coding assistants that you currently see performing, is there currently the golden standard? I'm guessing you have a bit of a subjective take on this, but is there like the golden standard of like an AI assisted coding assist, like AI assisted coding assistant? There was lots of assistants, but is there like one single best out there that people should definitely check out according to you, Jordan?
I mean, for coding, obviously, I think GitHub Copilot is the one everybody knows. It's sort of the OG. But on the data side, I would say that Hex does an amazing job of incorporating AI into everything, and not just sort of writing SQL, but also building building visualizations, and they've done an awesome job.
Yeah. Michele?
Yeah, I will go with GitHub for sure. They've been pioneering the field, so they definitely deserve a spot in the top 3. I mentioned Cursor before. They're taking a very radical approach and they innovate a lot. So definitely worth to keep an eye on that and testing it. And I can't leave Replit out of the top 3, of course.
Of course.
It's my daily job and passion. And we have a different take on that. I think what's cool about what we're building is helping you across the entire, end to end, from idea to deploying software in production. And that's why I found it very compelling. It's AI not only to create code, but across the whole software development lifecycle.
Yeah. And I guess it's also not like only who has the best model or something. I think it's also the person who like knows how to most smartly integrate it into their product, make it a very seamless workflow. So it's not only like lots of these tools are like mere wrappers around OpenAI, but actually like a lot of magic is happening in like building that wrapper around OpenAI as well. So definitely super exciting field to continue checking out. All right, let's wrap up here. Thanks so much for this session. I learned a ton. I hope the audience enjoyed it as well. Thanks again for joining us. And let's all continue looking at this field of AI-assisted coding. I'm very excited for what the future has in store. Thanks so much. See you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.